Today, Teresa and I speak with Vicki Courtemanche, co-founder of the national advocacy group End Workplace Abuse. Vicki has worked tirelessly to see legislation passed to combat bullying in the workplace. Currently, millions of American workers are at risk.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Earrings Off. We want to invite you to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. You can find us on Facebook at Earrings Off Podcast and on Instagram at The Earrings Off Podcast.
Welcome to Earrings Off. I'm Lou.
And I'm Teresa.
Well, we are excited. We are back with new episodes for 2024. And our first guest is Vicki Courtemanche. And we are excited to have you here with us today, Vicki, on Earrings Off. Welcome.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Teresa. It's so nice to be here with you.
Okay, great. Well, so Vicki, tell us, what is your vision for workers here in the U.S.?
Well, that's a mindful right there. But the biggest thing that we're looking for is to restore the relationship of balance, a healthy balance that should be between employers and employees. Because at this point in time, it was way out of whack, and it's continued to be. In 2020, the International Trade Union Confederation Global Rights Index indicated that the U.S. had the worst record among major developed countries when it came to workers' rights. And then we know in 2021, just a year later, after just coming out of COVID, we had what we call the Great Resignation. Mm-hmm. And people walked away from their jobs at just an unbelievable level in the midst of a strong labor demand. So, there's a little bit of kickback, coming from employees. We've seen that in, with Starbucks and some other, companies. But all of these reactions of walking out and resigning and finding other jobs, everyone cites a toxic work environment as the source of that.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about psychological abuse?
Sure. I'm going to preface it with workplace bullying and going back to that toxic work environment. Mm-hmm. Because that's when people hear that word, workplace bullying, it conjures up so many different things in your mind. The big kid in the lunchroom, the tough kid out on the field and at playtime, and that's not what it is. It really is psychological abuse. It's people mentally tormenting other people. And if I could, I'd like to read the definition that we are using for psychological abuse in some legislation that we have put forth. And we say it's mentally provocative harassment or maltreatment that would cause a reasonable person to experience physical, mental, or emotional distress. It has the effect of hurting, weakening, confusing, or frightening a person physically, mentally, or emotionally. And then the most important part that people, we want to get out there too, is that it has subsequent physical, mental, and emotional harm. And we are talking injury to the brain.
Oh, wow.
So it's, on top of everything else. So it sounds like it might be like psychological abuse. It's not just, it's a big package.
Right. You're saying that it's physical as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So the people who are exacting the abuse, do they know? Do they realize?
Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately, there's probably a second part to that, but yes, it is, they're aware that they're doing it. It's pretty, the bully, there's two examples here, because the interpersonal abuse system isn't a single one. It's actually two different interpersonal abuse systems. And the bully, is, they're after their own, they've targeted a person that they're threatened by. They're threatened by this person's competency, and they go after them, it pretty good. And people see it. It's not just happening in a bubble. Your coworkers are seeing it, that kind of thing too. So it's blatant behavior. But then there's this second level, and that is when you report it to the company. Mm-hmm. All right. And so this is where it gets a little convoluted, and it's been hard to bring this part up to the surface for everyone to see. But employers are not liable for psychological abuse. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that is like a big flag to them. They are like, if they acknowledge it, they will be liable for it. And so what they do is ignore it. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you are seeing this bad behavior that once, years ago, we would have all just went, oh my word, you can't act like that in the workplace. It's the norm. Mm-hmm. There are people being blatantly rude, that we would call unprofessional and unethical. And it's normalized in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is, that's so true, Vicki. When new managers, when they would first be promoted to manager level, they would have a week of orientation, and it was all day. And on the last day, I would present to them. And the topic that I spoke with them about was that you're excited. You've gotten this new role where you have staff and you have authority, but everybody's not suited for this role. Just because you have a certain set of skills does not mean that you are ready to manage people, be over people, because I talked to them about a certain level of maturity, and them not bringing their own stuff and just, mismanaging people, being abusive to people in the workplace. So we talked about that and talked about their need to maintain balance, because when you find that managers are stressed or they've got things going, that almost gives them permission to then victimize their staff, because their staff are the most vulnerable people at that point in the workplace. And so we would talk about that. And you're absolutely right. Many times higher ups, they turn, they turn a blind eye. They don't want to see it, because then the onus is placed on them to actually act and do something about it. And they are just reluctant, and just like you said, the legal ramifications of that. So it becomes pervasive in the workplace. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? How pervasive is psychological abuse in the workplace?
It's very pervasive. Some of the studies are showing that we know that it's more than half of our workplaces are toxic. Almost, a lot of them show up to 3/4 of our organizations and businesses are toxic, So what they're doing is they're making decisions based on their threat of liability and completely ignoring human well-being. Mm-hmm. So when that person who goes to, HR or to, where they go to the right place, that's where you're supposed to go, and you report it, then you put your head on another chopping block, because they're going to make you leave. There's 3 outcomes with this kind of behavior. It's either people are fired, or they leave because of health harm, like I did, or they die. Okay, so those are very dire consequences.
Mhm. Yeah, dire consequences. You're absolutely right. And it's pervasive and you see it. And not only does management or higher ups not do anything about it, but then you have a fear that sort of escalates throughout the team because they're seeing that behavior and people feel like sitting ducks. And that impacts, operations. And it's pervasive and it impacts the whole organization. Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It filters down when you have that kind of bad behavior, and it's bad enough that you have the bad behavior, but then when it's ignored,
Right.
it proliferates. And so then you have this whole, and I felt it, in my last days in the workplace in that last 6 months or whatever, people are fearful. No one wants to talk. No one wants to be honest. You're afraid to say anything. And, it squelches creativity. It
Mhm.
squelches different thoughts,
Mhm.
processes. You can't get
Yeah.
any place past
Right.
this two organizations that there's people up the top can do anything that you want and everybody down here has to be quiet. It just doesn't work.
Well, Vicki, when you went through that, when it first began, were you just sort of in disbelief that it was even happening? Were you questioning what was happening at that point?
It's again getting back to the twofold piece of it. I had a bully. This woman was the director, I was the assistant director, and I worked with her for 10 years. So from day one, she tried to keep me like out of sight and squelch me, and I didn't really recognize what she
Hmm.
was doing. I was just like, she's the director, I'm the assistant
Right.
director, so there's that power imbalance. But after working together for 10 years, our jobs were like lateralized so that it was no more like this and like this.
Hmm.
I looked like a peer to
Hmm.
her in the workplace, and she lost it. And she came after me full back,
Wow.
like I couldn't work. I couldn't, and I was there for, I don't know, another year and a little over a year. And I never was able to do my job fully again. She stopped copying me in the reservation system. For the sake of just understanding, we were high-end event planners.
Hmm.
So she stopped copying me in the reservation system. So,
Hmm.
you're
Yeah.
cutting me off at the knees.
Right.
She withheld invoices, documents, and asked other people to withhold it from, so it was virtually impossible for me to do my job. My supervisor tickled my ears for a good 5 months. And then finally, when I realized, I was like, this is done. And I had already been diagnosed with silent migraines. I went to HR,
Hmm.
and I was a 20-year employee. And on top of that, the institution was one of my alma maters.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
went in there with, and that's the problem is I went in there with expecting that an institution of higher ed would be handling things the right way
Right.
and that they
Right.
would deal with this. And that's not what happened. I was told that there was a complaint process, and there wasn't. It was really rigged protocol to make me jump through hoops like a trained seal, which I did because I believe them. These
Right.
are, these are people who are sitting in an administrative office building on a college campus cashing six-figure paychecks. So I think they're trustworthy workplace professionals. And that's the problem, is once you have that mindset, it's hard to get out of it. So I trusted them. And that's what's happening to people. We're
Right.
trusting
Right.
that the people up here are doing the right thing, and they're
Right.
not. And so
Right.
again, we're talking about, is the behavior blatant?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
So how are you now? How are you feeling?
Well, I am better. I've been out of work almost 6 years.
Mhm.
This March will be 6 years. When I came out of work, I was not okay. I essentially, snapped. I just, and that's what it is when you're in that, snapping under stress is predictable as the sun coming up. And so I don't realize that they're just keeping me sitting in this pot of stress. And all this time, the bully's getting worse. And, I'm getting put in physical harm's way. And, and I'm just going, what is going on? And like I said, one day I just got up and I said to my husband, I can't go back. And in that week prior to that, I had probably slept 5 hours tops in 7 days.
Vicki, oh my goodness.
So, and this is not unusual. Okay. What I am telling you, I am a typical targeted, victimized employee from bullying of it by an individual, and then the compensation with the organizational bullying. This is typically what happens. And yesterday, I don't know if you've seen it in the paper, but at Lincoln University, the vice president of student affairs, her name was Dr. Candia Bailey, committed suicide.
Oh my!
No.
And this is, and they did flag it. They're saying she was harassed and bullied, and they are naming the president as one of her bullies. So you're seeing, I'm sure there was below the level stuff, and then she went to report it, and then boom, boom, boom. But this is it. This is a woman, and this is not unusual. This woman is she was Dr. Candia Bailey. All right. So, and this is what, I can't tell you how many people, this is not happening to people who are not well educated or whatever. Talking with people. My degree was in legal studies and psychology. I didn't see it. It's like, it's a con. It's you're being conned in the workplace, and that's what it is. But look up her story.
I will do that,
because this is it's just to us, we see it, and we see this and we go, oh my word, we lost another person, bright, beautiful, and
have been avoided.
Yeah. Oh, it could have been. It could have been.
Mm-hmm. And women are increasingly the target in these situations. Yeah.
It's so funny because some of the studies say it's men, and but we do. This is definitely a matter of fact. Most of the advocates and everything that we work with, and I've done support group, in support groups and things like that. It is primarily women who come out, but you have to remember, because men deal with this very differently. And actually, this month, we have a gentleman who has been through this, and he is starting a support group, and we're going to try and get men to come out and talk about it, because, we as women, we're used to standing up and saying, oh, I've been victimized. I hate to say it, but we know how to do that. We do it. We've been doing it since day one. But men don't do that. They don't, they deal with it. And so we know that it is a large, that's happening too, but it's not, again, bringing this to the surface is like, it's like pulling teeth.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Would you tell us a little bit about the Workplace Safety Act?
Sure. In Massachusetts, there's this woman and she's my partner in crime these days. But when I came out of work in 2018, she had been working at legislation here in Massachusetts to to address bullying and mobbing. And it has just been a pleasure. Little by little, I began just tagging on and doing some things. And last year, too many years are going by now. In 2022, we found ourselves in just a unique place, and we sat down and we said, you know what, let's do this. Let's start our own, let's never mind what everybody else is doing. And so we co-founded what we call End Workplace Abuse, because there's, as I said, there's so many workers' rights here. So we want to kind of tag team in to acknowledge that this is one of many problems in the workplace. And this is our focus point, but we also, if you go on our website, endworkplaceabuse.com, you will see that Deb has listed all of the bills for workers' rights in all of the states. So it really kind of, again, just lets us network and acknowledge what's out there. And simultaneously, I don't know what possessed us. I don't know how we did it, but we also sat down and wrote this piece of legislation based on my experience, because Deb, people handle this differently.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was bullied in the workplace, she was younger. So, as an older woman, I was definitely more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And as a person who had been previously abused in my life, I was more vulnerable. And so I made choices that she didn't necessarily make. She was younger. Mm-hmm. She has a good, healthy self-esteem. And when she had this bad behavior after going to the higher ups and nothing was done, she left. Mm-hmm. So she didn't get significantly sick. She saw the nonsense and it affected her. But I was very sick, as Teresa said, and it was 2 years before I dared to even say, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to be okay. And so, when we sat down to write the legislation, and Deb and I were talking in workplace abuse, what we did was we really pulled out that bottom layer of the employer, and we're putting it front and center. Everybody talks about the bully, who's the big mouth, who's the, causing all the trouble. Everyone's talking about the bully. The bully's not the problem. The bully is the covert behavior that is happening beneath when mm-hmm. they're telling you that there's a complaint system and there isn't, and they turn a willful blind eye and a willful deaf ear, and they let people, marinate in this stress until they die or commit suicide, or they, can't function like I couldn't. As I said, it is very typical.
Very good information. Mm-hmm. Well, Vicki, those are all of the questions that we have for you today. We want to thank you, applaud you on your work and what you're doing to address this. And you are certainly to be commended. We took a bit of a break in December, and this is our first interview back, as I said. And now I'm reminded yet again, of why we do this. And it's so that we can connect with people like you who are making a difference. And so we thank you for that. Do you have any parting words for our audience?
Well, I guess I would just like to say, with the Workplace Psychological Safety Act, that it has been introduced in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And last year, Rhode Island has a 1-year legislative session, and the Senate passed the law.
Oh, wow.
But now it's a feather in the cap. But we're going back this year. Just in a few months, we'll be heading back that way. And we are really making efforts to engage the House mm-hmm. there. So that, we obviously need both parties to come together so that it would, that we can move in the right direction. And last October here in Massachusetts, we had a public hearing. And in the past, the most that we've had in 2021, when we had a public hearing, we pulled together 50 advocates to submit testimony. Mm-hmm. And that was historic. We've never been able, because it's such an undercover thing, to bring 50 people together to submit written and oral testimony. And that was mm-hmm. done all, through Zoom, because COVID was still in play. Right. But this past October, we had, and we're not sure, because this is the interesting piece, is that they are not letting us. We've always been given this information, and now they are withholding it from us. Is that we had, in our action network, we had 689 advocates sign up to say that they were submitting some form of testimony. We had an automated system that we know 200 people submitted testimony. Wow. And a couple of weeks before the hearing, this went viral on TikTok, and we have some, wonderful people out there. I want to say the Clapback Corporate, that woman, her name's Mercedes. She's amazing. Putting out their employee rights. And all of a sudden, we were getting people. So we don't know. We believe that we had over 1,000 advocates submit testimony. And as I said, when we went to the State House and said, can we have that information? They said, oh no. So we're like, the Massachusetts State House is a toxic work environment, as is a lot of our government. And it has been in the news this week. It is the least effective state house in the country.
Wow.
So this is kind of a sad note, but a good
Yeah.
note. This is still our justice system. And, we're calling them out. We're just going to keep on, banging on doors and talking. And I can't thank you, Lou and Teresa, for this forum. This is exactly it. This is not on the 6 o'clock news. This is not hardly ever in the newspaper. We actually did make the Boston Globe this past Monday.
Okay.
And it wasn't, it was comparing us to another piece of legislation. And you know what? We were thrilled. We're like, we're in the, it's public awareness. This is
Yeah.
huge. So thank you,
Yes.
thank you, thank
Yes.
you for all that you do.
Well, thank you again for all that you do. And thanks for coming on Earrings Off, Vicki. We wish you all the best. Take care.